I can't remember the first panic attack I ever had, but I do know that I started getting them pretty young. My favorite way to have a panic attack is to disassociate. Likely a technique I learned young when experiencing trauma, and one I sadly can say I still implement sometimes still to this day. It's something I actively work on in therapy, and I'm not sure if I will ever get over it, and I'm not sure if the disassociation or the panic attacks will ever go away, but I do try and manage it the best I can. I think we've all gone through some shit and do different things to get through the shit. I wish my get through the shit methods were like exercise and reading, but typically it's overeating and drinking, and it used to be smoking weed in high school. Nowadays, if I'm stressed, I go for a walk or I take a really hot shower, I cuddle my dog. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not going to lie to you, I still drink wine and eat ice cream. But I also know that moving my body and doing some bilateral movement, which can just be walking, really helps to self-soothe. I'm also in weekly therapy, and I've been on a low dose of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication for almost 2 years, and that's really working for me. I had never been on them before. It took a long time for me to get there, but, working with my doctors, that was something that has been helping me. At a dinner party at Soho House, West Hollywood, I think almost 2 years ago now. But time is strange now. I'm getting to an age, and I don't have any children, so I can't base everything on their ages. I'm just basing them on my life, which seems to be a blur. But anyway, at a dinner party at Soho House a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago, I was sat next to Millana Snow, who at a first glance is intimidatingly beautiful. But after a breath, quite literally, she is so down to earth and warm that her outer beauty really just presents itself as a reflection of what is inside of her. Millana is a healer, a teacher, a wellness entrepreneur, and she reached out to me after the dinner to co-host a breathwork class. And I have to say, I was like, what? Me? Why me? But me being me, I, of course, was like, oh, hell yes, let's do this. And I invited my network of women I thought would be really interested in it. And I invited some men. Actually, no, I invited one man, Brandon Holman, who we give a shout out to later. I love Brandon. Brandon should come on the show. Brandon, if you're listening, come on the show. Later in the episode, Millana will guide us through some of the breathwork tools that I learned that day. And they've actually become very helpful to me. And I really hope that they become helpful to you. I was so moved and impressed during this breathwork class. It really was transformative. And it was amazing to do it in a group setting because some of the attendees really opened up and shared their stories, and everybody had a very different experience, myself included. It was cool. And I feel really fortunate that Millana is joining us today. She really is a gift. I loved getting to know her more. I want to get to know her more. And I'm excited to share her with you and her story. It's jarring when you look at my Instagram and then you come and see me in real life and you're like, oh God, you have no eyelashes.
No.
It's true. It's true. You're like, whoa. I know, I get it all the time. Or vice versa, when people only kind of see me on Zoom during the day. Because if you had told me years ago that I would be rocking just skin routine, I'd be like, there's no way. But you know what? Guess what changes you? In a global pandemic. A global pandemic, buying a house, and
wait, when did you get married?
I got married right before the pandemic.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
A lot of change.
It's a lot of change. It's a lot. I live in the burbs now. Everything takes longer.
I'm proud
That's
of
the
you
biggest
buying
thing.
your house. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Put on these glasses so I can see your beautiful face more. Well, no, you've been traveling too, no?
Well, I only went to Maui. That's like the only place I've been this year, but it was great. Have you been to
I've been,
Maui before?
you know what? I can't even handle those right now. Yes, I've been to Maui before. Both of my brothers live in Hawaii. They both live on
Oh, wow.
Oahu.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's
That's
kind of
wild.
random, right?
Yeah.
One of them is in the army. The other one is in the marine side. He's a marine virologist. It's always hard to
Wow.
say. I know. So he studies all the viruses.
How
and
did you
everything.
become Miss Conde? Like, how did that happen? Like that.
Well, first of all, you can have me on your podcast, and I can tell you, I'm interviewing you today. How did I do
Okay,
that?
I'm sorry. I'm
I've
sorry.
always no, it's fine. I mean, I laugh. I've always worked sort of in publishing and media. And I always just pop up in random places. That's like when we did our or I shouldn't say we. I should say you hosted a lovely breathwork class at
No, we did.
So
We
House,
did.
and my chucklehead showed up. But that's why, like, Brandon was like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm always here. I'm always around. I'm so random." Is
No,
the
I
truth.
needed you there, Liz, because I needed to validate that my breath work is not woo woo as people think it is. So I needed you to ground the space, which you did. So it's
Did I?
perfect.
Well, first of all, that's a great place. What a great segue to start. The breath work is not woo woo. Do people think what you do is woo woo?
I think so, but to be fair, I think that the way that I communicate what I do has shifted to be more inclusive for people who might otherwise not be open to the spiritual side of breathwork, because there can be a deeply spiritual side to what you experience when you go that deep. And so I've started to open up my language to talk more about the brain, what happens to the body, and more about the experience from like a physical, mental perspective, not just the emotional, spiritual side, because there is all of that going on.
Was there like a specific kind of person that wouldn't embrace it? Like, were those the people that probably needed it the most? Likely.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I'm really glad that I trained a bunch of different people, because I found that someone who's like in corporate finance or someone that's like more in the academic world was not super into the way that I used to communicate this, because I think a lot of people, if you mention anything like the universe or God, those words are automatically like put into a bin of woo woo, religious, or spiritual. And if someone doesn't identify as any of those things, then that's kind of like end of conversation, you know? And so honestly, one of the big shifts that I've had recently, like I'd say in the past like 9 months, was to change the way that I speak about what's going on, because I want to reach the very serious corporate, the atheists, the people who are like, I don't believe in the spirit. I don't believe in a soul or what happens after death. I don't care. And I'm like, that's okay. We could still help you. We could still help you regulate your nervous system.
Well, because those are the
We can help you
people
with your
that work.
emotions.
Yeah, exactly. In those high pressure atmospheres or surround themselves and such need, I think, tools that you can educate people about that are within yourself, to self regulate. I mean, I have had anxiety my whole life. I was an anxious little kid. I'm an anxious person now, obviously. That should
No,
not shock.
not obvious. I
Really?
did not know that about you at all. No.
Oh my God, for real? Oh my, I feel like I'm the most anxious, palatably anxious person, but cool. But, I've spent a really long, exercise for me, and particularly like Pilates, yoga, walking, the water. I mean, I've been in therapy for so long, and my current therapist is somatic, which is interesting in the sense that we do
Whoa.
everything virtual because that's what she feels most comfortable with still during the pandemic. So I'm like, wait, I go to a somatic therapist I
On Zoom.
never see in person. But what I love about her is really I just saw her, this week, and it's all about, how you can try to self-regulate, because that's, the spin that I always get into is kind of like how to calm myself down. And so when you say the people who were, potentially more difficult to educate about your knowledge are the ones that are in these like, finance or corporate or, jobs. I'm like, no, those are the fools
They're
that need it
here.
the most.
Yeah, they're here. They're in their heads. And I find that often even for my clients that I've worked with for years that are very smart or educated or have become very successful because of their minds, they can be the ones that have the most challenging experience of being in their bodies,
It's hard
and
to
just
be in your body, I think.
yeah, especially if we weren't taught how to be in our bodies. I think one of the reasons why a lot of us as adults have a hard time self-regulating is because we weren't taught how to self-regulate as kids. And that's not a fault of our parents, but it's kind of like how our culture is built. So we don't really know how to like feel emotions and be okay and safe in those emotions and know that actually feeling them is how you relieve yourself of them. And so there's just so many things around emotion specifically, which are also obviously tied to the nervous system and all these different mechanisms that your body does to regulate so that we can function at all. But the emotional side of breathwork to me is what's actually most interesting, because what I find, especially with someone who's living in a more like, an A-type lifestyle, who's like more masculine and they're like, just like, let's get things done. I have a list, or, just really the average overachiever, the average American overachiever.
Right.
It's like, what I find is that person tends to not have a lot of practice around how to feel their emotions or to even value them or even understand that that's a part of their everyday experience, whether they know it or not. And that what they tend to do is override the experience of feeling emotions, which means you're in your body, right? It's not just like having balance or being able to go for a run, but it's actually being able to feel what your experience is in your day-to-day life as it's happening in real time, instead of what could happen or what used to happen. And so like one of the things that's coming to mind is a few years ago, I did you ever go to Summit like in the early days, like 2017? Did you ever go to LA?
Girl.
Okay, we don't even have to get into that. So I was like the one healer of color in that whole thing. Let me not diss them, but it's true. And and I happened to be doing a breathwork session. I did too when Wim Hof was doing one. And if you know who Wim Hof is, he's like quintessential like hyper masculine overachiever breathwork guy. Like he's great. Like he really is really good at what he does, but he's got a more extreme approach to breath work and cold exposure. Anyway, so I had to do a thing at the same time. And I was like, great, nobody's coming because there's like 15 women here. Turns out my sessions were completely packed. I had literally hundreds of men crying for an hour straight. And to this day, I've still had people come up to me and say, hey, you're that lady that made me cry for the first time in like 30 years back in 2017. Why that is so like impactful in my mind is because our nervous system, like talk about regulating, our nervous system needs us to cry because it's a way of releasing those toxic stressor chemicals. So many people are literally holding in chemicals that our body is trying to excrete because we're taught not to cry. And so when you
I
get
love
into
a good cry.
Right? Okay, I'm so glad. Yay!
I mean, you know where I particularly love a good cry? Is
What?
on the plane, on the airplane.
Tell me more.
Have you ever cried on an airplane?
I probably have, knowing myself, but
best.
why? Why is it an airplane thing? I'm so curious.
I don't know. I feel like there's something sad about, well, nowadays there's many things that are sad about travel, but there's something so romantic and lonely and sad. You have to be traveling alone. There has to be there has to have the perfect storm.
Yeah.
I remember leaving France. I had this whirlwind few months and I like dated this guy and it was so dramatic. I like almost missed my flight. And I'm like running through Charles de Gaulle and he's like leaving me and I like got on the plane and I just like sobbed. But there's also something kind of amazing about crying in public like that and everyone's trapped and forced to watch you.
You're
kind of great.
Exhibitionist of the emotions. I love it.
Yeah,
I felt that way on the subways in New York.
Another
subways.
Perfect place to cry. Another place I have cried many times is on the New York subway. Same. Specifically, the 1 or the 9 train when I've missed the 2 or the 3, and I realize how long that motherfucking ride is going to be, and I just really cry it out. Yeah, no, I think crying it's interesting. It's hard to do sometimes. And sometimes it comes out. I mean, for me, it always comes up like during any kind of animal video. And then really in strange moments of television, I really will, I will cry. But the crying is really good. It's funny, when we did our class, there were a few women that cried, which was like a really beautiful and really shared personal stories, and was like, it was really lovely. I didn't feel a sense of crying. I felt really warm and hot, which was like kind of great. We were outside. You had to be there. We're on the roof of the new Soho house. You're doing your thing. I'm like awkwardly announcing people whilst laying down on said chaise, music going. It was great. It was really cool. I'm like, I could do this all the time. But that kind of rhythmic breathing, is it something that you feel like people need to be guided through, or can they kind of try on their own? Or like, how does that work for somebody? A lot of the listeners that I have who I love do not live in Los Angeles or New York or Miami. They live in other places, even though one of them just tried to coerce me to going to Philadelphia. And I was like, no, because then I'd have to see my mother-in-law, and I'm not doing that. But how can people learn even just like small steps to regulate? Because I'm really such a believer in self-regulation.
Totally. Well, I'm so glad that you asked that, because whenever I share breath work, and I might have said this when we did our event, that this is me just teaching someone once is actually my gift for them to take into the rest of their lives. Because if you just learn how to do the basic pattern, that alone will help regulate your system. So there's a couple components to this answer. Like, it is definitely helpful to have a trauma-informed guide, no matter what you've been through or what you're experiencing, because if you have someone who can really help you go beyond your own comfort and your own limitations, you can actually tap into emotions, memories, somatic experiences that maybe you would have been too afraid to go, or that you didn't even realize that you had. So it's really helpful to have a powerful guide for that reason. But what's really cool about this 3-part breath, so it's 2 inhales. It's 1 inhale into the lower belly, so the belly balloons out. Then you take a second inhale into the chest, and then you exhale out. I'm just sharing that for anybody who wants to try it.
You should try it. Everybody listening, you should try it. Oh, you want to try it right now?
We could totally do it.
We can just
do a little modeling of what it looks like. So, okay, you want to just close your eyes for a second? Because I feel like this would be good for us, actually, especially since you had kind of a weird day. So
fair enough.
You just reset. So with your eyes closed, and anybody who's listening, obviously do not do this driving. If you are able to pull over or park, that's better.
Not close your eyes whilst driving your
Sometimes people will
vehicle.
Keep their eyes open and still do it, and it will bring up stuff. So let's just not do that. So you'll breathe in through your mouth the entire time. And the first inhale is going to be down into the base of your spine so that your belly balloons out, but it's going to be through your mouth. So it's going to sound like this. And then you're going to take a second inhale through the chest into the heart to the full capacity. And then you're going to exhale out of the mouth. So let's just do that like 5 times. Now you can slow it down. Let's see if we can do it even deeper, but slower. Let's do it 2 more times, letting the belly balloon out as much as you can, and taking a second inhale into the heart and exhale it out. Let's do 1 more with your eyes closed, belly full capacity, and then to the heart, and exhale it all out. Now keep your eyes closed just for a second. So we did about 5 breaths in this pattern. And in this moment right here, what's literally happening in your brain is getting a message from your vagus nerve, which regulates your nervous system. It's the biggest nerve that tells your body what's going on. Your brain is getting the message that you're safe. And so what now happens is that your nervous system goes into what's called parasympathetic. And when you go into parasympathetic, your body's like, oh, I now just received the message that I'm not being chased by a bear or murdered by someone. And I can relax. I can expand my mind instead of narrowing in on the exit and survival. Literally 30 seconds of doing that breath tells your brain, I'm not in danger. So you can do that at any time. Like before you have a meeting that's really going to be scary or hard, or before you have something that's exciting that you really want to do, but you feel nervous. That pattern of breath is literally just telling your brain, hey, we're safe. You can turn off the system that says we're not. And this is the issue. A lot of us are actually on what's called the sympathetic system mode, where we're constantly in danger, even though we're actually totally safe.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. Because I do feel good. Reset computer and all. Thank you, corporate life. When I was reading your bio, because I was like, God, we know each other, but like I need to know more. 4 years old, it says, is when you on your website. I did not write that website. This is not Wikipedia. This is your website. 4 years old, it says, is when your website says when you started practicing meditation, which as a 37-year-old, I suck at meditation. I try. I'm bad. My mind wanders. I'm just being honest. I'm an honest gal.
Yes, you are. I keep it real. I love that about you.
Who taught you or who introduced meditation to you at 4?
I mean, it's really wild. One of the reasons why I put that in my bio is because I'm like, I can't believe that happened. Like, that's such a crazy thing.
It's tight.
Thank you. It was my grandmother. It was my mom's mom. And I used to spend a lot of time with her because my mom worked a lot. And she was a total hippie who literally was like in a hippie cult where they meditated and chanted all the time. And so one day I was at her house and it was nap time and I probably was like not ready to go to sleep. And she said, okay, so we're going to do something. I want you to close your eyes and walk out of your body. And I was like, okay. And so I literally closed my eyes and I imagined myself walking around the room and she guided me through it. She's like, now I want you to imagine what the kitchen looks like. Now I want you to float above the house. What do you see? And so that, unbeknownst to me, is what's known as astral projection. Regardless of what you think about what actually happens to the soul and if that's a real thing, what it did was it introduced me to guided meditation. So shortly after that, since I liked it so much, she started to teach me how to chant. So I would chant myself to sleep. She would teach me how to visualize white light healing my body, sending it to places that I felt sick. And it just was like something that I did for fun after a while. And that became kind of my whole life behind the scenes. Even when I was in my 20s in New York and going to the club until 7 a.m. in the morning, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
I cannot see that for you. I don't believe that for you.
Girl, I went so hard. So hard.
You went hard in the paint?
Harder than you know. But I also had a deeply spiritual life and I meditated back then. So it was like this really interesting contrast because a lot of it I was like kind of in the closet about. Like I didn't want to tell anybody that I had all of these tools because my whole childhood was me studying religion, spirituality, meditation, Eastern spirituality and psychology. So yeah, it's weird. It's out there, but
it's kind of awesome because I think, I have this vivid memory of spending the night at this girl's house when I was growing up. We were friends and then she stopped being friends with me and started being friends with my best friend. And then they both stopped being best friends with me. And I never think about it, but just saying. But I have vivid memories of spending the night at her house and all of us girls were like, screaming. She had 2 older sisters. We were like running around screaming, doing whatever. And her dad coming in and my mom would sometimes do this too, but I just remember him specifically having us imagine that we had hot candle wax going all the way down our body. He's like, wow, think of it here and think of it melting down. And like, where does it feel warm? And like, basically guided meditation.
Yes.
And sometimes my mom would say, imagine a beach. You love the beach. I mean, she's pretty lazy. She'd be like, imagine the beach that you love. And then like close the door. And I'm like, that was the worst guided meditation I've ever had. But I remember it vividly because sometimes I'll still to this day, it was really impactful and it really helped me. And I think, I'm at an age now where I have a lot of friends who have already had children. So they've got toddlers. And so I don't invite them to my home anymore or they have, I'm just kidding. I'm really coming out with the kid shots today.
You are so good.
Just kidding. But I really don't. If you have a fucked up toddler, do not come to my beautiful home with antiques everywhere.
Not welcome.
Yeah, don't fucking come here. So no, but and then I have friends who are now just having children. And a lot of, I even listen to a lot of my listeners who are like, oh my God, I have like all these kids in the house and I'm like losing my mind. And I have a lot of sympathy for kind of this idea of trying to not only regulate yourself in those challenging moments, but also with the kid. Cause I was a nanny for like 10 plus years. And I
What?
just, yes. Oh my God, dude. I was a hardcore nanny, like a real one. Like pick up the kids, take them to school, take them to swim, take them to soccer, take them to speech therapy, blobbity bloop bloop bloop, spend over the nights, the weekends. Oh yeah, I'm still cool with all the parents too. I
That's
loved
amazing.
being a babysitter. I loved it. I really did. But I was also like 20 and I gave them back.
Totally.
Like they weren't mine, It didn't,
Totally.
so it was different. But I think, the idea that your grandmother shared this knowledge with you that you could then take yourself and practice and develop is such an amazing thing, because I think, or, maybe it's just my perception, but I always thought meditation was something that you had to be, I don't know, like older and really, you know what I mean, get into. But it sounds like it's actually, the way you describe it, something so wonderful for children, especially today, who are, quite frankly, around screens far more than I ever was, or anybody before us, to kind of self-regulate, self-soothe, use your imagination, which I think is
Oh,
something that
so important.
is super important. Like, I don't know why kids don't just like stare out the window and
Totally. That's
dream.
all I used to do.
Me too. I'd be like,
Totally.
please turn that Janet Jackson up. And please, my mom's like, what? I'm like, Miss Jackson, if you're nasty, and I'm gonna look out this window and dream about the day I moved to LA. And guess what? Unfortunately, it happened.
You did it. And we're so grateful. Yeah, I mean, well, can I just reflect something back to you, actually?
Sure.
Because I think that you're not the only person that I've heard. Well, you're definitely not the only person who's told me that you can't meditate. And I'm sure so many of your listeners believe that too. But the candle wax exercise meditation, you've been meditating since you were a kid. That is meditation. And I wonder if that would work for you now. The thing that I noticed about kids and why I felt so lucky was because I didn't question what my grandmother was having me do. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I can walk out of my body and I can send myself light and healing. So I just did it. When we become older, we start questioning easy things. We lose our playfulness. We lose that innocence that anything is possible and that things can be easy. What if you doing the candle wax meditation is actually a meditation and it's easy for you? And you just imagine it melting down your skin, because here's what we're really doing. We're getting ourselves to be in the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, on like a biological level, we are literally regulating our nervous system. But two, we're allowing our mind to now stop thinking about what's in the future or what's happened in the past and open to what's here in the present moment, like love, gratitude, safety, potential ideas that haven't been able to come in because we're thinking about always what's next, right? So I just wonder if maybe you could give yourself credit and use that.
All right, I'm down for the candle wax sitch. I mean, because, for me, what manifested later on with the anxiety was, not being able to sleep. And that is just, and then you get into this Westworld loop of like, holy shit, I'm going to be so tired, all of these terrible things. And
yeah,
I'm a lot better now than I was, but that, that's a scary loop that a lot of people get into. And so I think, kind of trying to do that guided meditation, if just kind of starting with your own thoughts, is difficult. You lightly mentioned going hard in the paint in New York in your 20s.
Let's do it.
I assume this is when you were like modeling primarily,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
My time in the short time of modeling and the long time of acting and presenting and writing, etc. It's funny, it's a weird business because it's very lonely. I find it's very lonely, even though you're in front of so many people. And I feel like I think maybe more so now, but back in the day, people weren't really talking about the effects of people legitimately talking about what you look like to your face, which is a wild fucking experience. And if you haven't had it happen to you, bless don't let it happen to you. I'm just kidding. But like,
Yeah.
it is awful. It's like really something so strange.
Yes.
And I felt like people weren't really talking about how much it hurt them or affected them. And so that loneliness was really intense. Do you
Yes.
feel like the industry has changed? That's the first part. And then the second part is, how do you work with like models and actors and trying to help them through self-regulation? Because this industry is so dysregulating for so many
Yeah.
reasons.
Oh my gosh. So many reasons. I mean, yes. So first of all, I had no idea that you had another history. One, you were a nanny, actor, writer. What all this? I knew you were funny,
Girl,
but
you gotta listen to the podcast. I talk all about it. Girl, you gotta listen. Cool.
I know.
Like, subscribe,
I'm sorry
5
about
stars.
that.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay,
It's
let
all
me get
good.
in there.
Just
Okay,
ask Brandon Holman. He'll tell you all about it. Shout out to Brandon.
Well, I think, having worked a lot between New York, London, and LA, I've had a lot of actors and models and from having been in the industry myself for over, I don't even know, it's been a long ass time. Let's just say that. I found that, yes, there's so much to this. One, I found the reason why a lot of us got into entertainment is not just because we have these talents, but we have these talents because there was something that was in us, maybe in our childhood, where we wanted and needed to be seen and validated in some way. There are so many of us, and myself included.
You don't say.
Right? we didn't get that as
Are
kids.
some of us anxiously attached and therefore like really need the love and approval from someone that wasn't giving it to us?
Yeah, so it's like, let me become an actor. Let me become a model. Let me go to New York so that somebody will see me. That was me. Yeah. And yes, I was tall and I had certain things that allowed me to like be on that track. But a lot of it was really because deep in my subconscious mind, I needed to be seen. I needed to be validated and affirmed and loved. Right. And so obviously we all seek that. And all of us in various ways have had that in our childhood. But I do find that in this industry in particular, that seems to be a little bit more of a thing. And so what I found from working with my clients in entertainment that are on the talent side is that that's actually the stuff that we need to work out the most, because what is most painful and most lonely and isolating is the fact that we can never get that outside of ourselves. So if you are unlucky like I was, which means I got rejected more than I got approved, okay, because the modeling industry did not want people with curly hair, did not have Black models, was not interested if you had even a tiny bit of an ass. So like I never worked as a model.
I can't believe that.
No, it's
way.
true.
You worked. I've seen it. I've seen the runway videos.
No, that's after I was on Project Runway. So I was on Project Runway, and Project Runway is entertainment. That's not fashion. Once I started to get into television, I got to have a different experience. But when I was trying to be a fashion model, it was nothing but rejection, no matter how much I did the thing that they were telling me I had to do. And I only say this because one of the things that I discovered when I started really healing my inner child and healing some of the things that happened to me as a kid around, being seen, being loved, being validated in the ways that kids need to be healthy adults, I realized that I had almost set myself up so I could have more of that rejection, more of that, like, you can't be validated from the outside. It's an inside job. So I say all this to say, I think one of the things that I work with a lot of my clients, I don't really do one-on-ones anymore. Now I do the trainings and like the events, is we really work on like, what happened to you when you didn't feel seen? Can we go back and reclaim that part of you and see yourself? Can we validate yourself? And what's so wild, Liz, is that when we start doing that, guess what? We start booking. We start getting jobs. Our social media starts taking off. Because
I need you to call somebody at Meta. Everyone's sick of listening to this, but I am like, something is wrong with my Instagram, or I have a conflated view of what is going on or of who I should be on the internet. I go up and down hundreds of followers a day.
I
cannot be fucking normal. And I'm stuck. I get like stuck and it's like hundreds of followers. And then it's like down. It's very weird. It's very strange. They won't verify me. I think I'm shadow banned. Something I did wrong. Who knows?
Well, I literally just had a conversation this weekend with a very good friend of mine who is a very big celebrity stylist who said the exact same thing to me. She's like, girl, I have all these clients. Why am I not verified? So this is what I said. I said, let's look at the energetic of this and let's just take away the woo woo. Let's think about the psychology of this. What if it's not just like I do A so then I get B, but what if there's like a bigger story here? What if there's something inside of you that's wanting to be worked out and this is like the projection that it's trying to work it out through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like when we have like let's say this, like when we get ghosted in our dating days and we just keep getting ghosted and we're like, why does this keep on happening? Why is this not working out for me? Often because there's a message in that cycle. Social media is no different. It's just another paradigm. It's just another mirror. So I just wonder, and this is what I told my friend, I was like, I wonder what is your relationship with this thing that you feel so bothered by that supersedes social media? And how is social media just one of the mirrors that you can look at to heal something inside of yourself?
Oh boy.
Ooh, I don't know if you wanted that, girl. I don't know if you wanted that.
I knew she was coming hot. She's like, I put on a face. You look like a gremlin. And I'm about to tell you the real.
Stop it. You stop.
Oh
Stop.
my God. I'm dead. You mention Summit, which I don't think a lot of people, that's like some inside baseball shit that I would know about. Summit is, oh my God, I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, how do you describe it? You describe it.
Well, I'm never going to get invited again. So let's just really go in. Summit is a place for rich white people to go to talk about how they're going to make the world a better place through technology and like smart marketing and connections. Am I wrong so far?
Spot on. Jeff Bezos was one of the keynote speakers.
Yeah. And you're like going to get this like sick Montclair jacket at the end. And you're like going to go skiing together. And like somebody's going to be on mushrooms and like, but then everyone's talking about some people took private jets in while other people had to take like Jet Suite X. It's a bunch of bullshittery. But what it signifies to me, though, is this kind of co-opting of, Eastern philosophy, spirituality, meditation. I think, we're in kind of like an interesting place. And a lot of people make fun of it. And there is something to be made fun of about kind of the whole, and you keep saying woo woo and how that's like a negative thing. I'm also like born and raised from San Francisco. Like I just spoke to her yesterday, Marta, who I love, is like in her 60s, lesbian, doesn't use the term, like doesn't spell women with MEN, but spells it with like 2 I's. She's a witch. She's OG. Like I grew up around like 6 cool women like that are like so all lucky. Witches and fucking hippies and they're cool. And so I like whatever.
Yes.
And a lot of them are women of color. And, what I've seen now is this kind of goopification, for lack of a better term. And I like goop. I know the trial has been entertaining.
Totally.
Another distraction tactic, in my opinion, to not talk about guns and trans people and trans women of color, but that's rather here nor there. But this co-opting of white women in these spiritual spaces, how do you, or does that bother you? One, as a woman of color and somebody who clearly had a grandmother who this was a part of her life. So it's very much, I would say, inherently a part of yours, whether or not you even were to practice today. Being around that is, a part of your story. Does it bother you? And then if it does or if it doesn't, you lead a lot of groups with women of all different backgrounds.
Yes.
Is there ever a moment that you think in those groups that you're leading an opportunity for white women specifically to like have an opportunity to learn or like understand the roots of kind of breathwork, spirituality, et cetera, that you do?
Thank you for asking this. No, this is so cool. I mean, I think it used to bother me because there was a time when I started, there was no such thing as the wellness industry. And I would go into yoga studios just as a student. And I was the only person of color. And this was in New York City.
Yeah.
So it was frustrating for a long time. And I did, I made noise about it and was often ignored. I remember I'd get lots of interviews in like all the big magazines, and they would cut out all of my comments on diversity and inclusion in the wellness and spiritual space.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
Terrible.
That was frustrating for a long time. And then I realized that I could be mad about this thing that's bigger than me, or I could just be what I want to see. And so what I've done for almost a decade is just done my best to open doors for people like me, right, and to do it all the time. And now, and because there are so many of us, white women included, who are mindful about that, the industry is completely different. Still a lot of room to grow, still problematic, but better and getting better. So I'm optimistic about it. And I think it's helpful for me to be optimistic about it. And I think what I would really love for white women to do is actually learn from women of color.
Yeah.
Go and support programs, not even support. Let's not even say support, because you're going to learn. Just come to a training that is led by a Black woman, a Latino man, an Indigenous person. Like, go and learn from these people and be their patrons, be their students, because that's how you're going to really understand. It's like, I really appreciate people who are doing the like the anti-racist work. That's not my thing. I don't focus on that. And that's not where I understand how to approach this, but I appreciate that that's out there and that's happening. And there's all forms of activism to make sure that we're learning how to do better. But what I really think is just go and train with some people of color. And then trust me, you will learn.
Real talk.
And humble yourself, but also like recognize that just like you said, me being around my grandmother is how I was able to learn. So can you imagine if you go and train with an Indigenous elder in South America? Like,
so
you
tight.
will learn so much. And it's not about doing better. It's about actually like, they're going to help you heal in a way that, you know, a white woman who just learned how to teach breath work in Malibu 6 months ago can't, right? Because that abuela is 6 generations and it's in her blood, you know? But I also will say, like, you know, I'm half white. I was raised by white women. My grandmother who taught me meditation is a white woman from Oklahoma.
Oh, word? That's white.
Yeah.
That's tumbleweed white.
Like lots of tumbleweeds. And I went there often. I would know. So let's just say I understand where my mother's family comes from and wanting to also learn. And I have a lot of compassion. And I think and a lot of patience, because sometimes that is required. Mm-hmm. But I think what's necessary when I see like someone like my grandma, for women today of all colors, is to remember that we all came from a culture that we've lost. Like even my white grandmother, her family, my family on that side is from Europe. And there's Indigenous Europeans that are still like the Irish, like the Sami people in Norway, right? There's still so much culture, like the herbalism that comes from all these different parts of the world that people are disconnected from. So what I'm trying to say is that we all have a heritage that we have been disconnected and uprooted from. I think it's really important for us to, one, learn from people of color, especially elders. It's really, really important. We've lost that in our Western culture. But two, reconnect with your own roots, because we have lost that no matter where you come from or who you are. And that's how I think we can start to now come to this like more real healing instead of co-opting somebody else's.
Pause, because that was amazing. Everybody rewind. Rewind while you drive. Just don't close your eyes and do breath work while you drive. But it's true. I mean, I had a really interesting experience. My grandmother came to live with us when I was young, but I was also like, my kind of nanny caretaker was a fucking 70-year-old El Salvadorian woman.
Wow.
Let me tell you. It was cool. And I also, I've spent a lot of my life in Mexico. There's so many things you don't know about me, but my godparents, I know, live in Mexico, and they moved, my godmother's mother moved down there in the 1930s. So They've been down there since the 30s. I feel wildly connected to Mexico. If there was ever a place you saw me disappear to, it would be there. And so I've been really lucky, and I love that you bring up the elders' perspective, because I learned like a lot about how to like fix a cold, like,
Yes.
my period, like so many things from women of different cultures and my grandmother, even though my grandmother was like such a wasp and like, I mean, she was crazy, but, and like chain smoked cigs and ate nothing but Reese's peanut butter cups and would like hide them in clothes. And like,
Oh,
I'll never forget my mom washing a sweater and like all the chocolate. And I was like, that wasn't me. That was that little old lady who lives down the hall. But like, even like teas, or like, I just got sick during the Oscars. And like, it's almost like I went into like robo mode. Like, I knew exactly what to do. I'm like, I got to heat up this onion, this clove of garlic, this turmeric, this clove, this water, this bone
yes.
broth. Like, what are we all fucking morons? Like, who hasn't been drinking bone broth since
Yes.
the beginning? You know what I mean? Or like different things, right?
Yes.
Like understanding why spice is important, right? Like, it's not
Yes.
just for fun, but it's like also very medicinal. So, and I never would have learned that as like a white girl. I mean, a random white girl from the Bay. Again, I'm lucky being in the Bay, having a lot of different types of people around me. But like, even cannabis, right? Like, I don't really smoke very much anymore. I did smoke this week. I got a little too high. I got a little scared. I ate ice cream and I pet my dog. I have to be so careful. I
Why are
really
those
have.
two things connected? I'm so confused. As you ate ice cream and pet your dog, is there more
Calm
to it?
down, calm down, because I got scared from the weed. I
Oh,
got
okay, okay,
scared. Like, I
okay.
thought,
That helped you. That helped you regulate.
yeah, that was me regulating. I was like,
Okay, okay. Love it. Love
but
it.
like why topical cannabis has been so amazing for so long. And now, you know what I mean? Obviously it's mainstream and people use it for a variety of different reasons. But for a long time, for me, it was like, that's why I always talked about CBD. I'm like, I don't need to get high. I need this for like an anti-inflammatory purpose. And I learned all that shit from fucking OGs in Oakland, like way older women being like,
Yep.
dude, you don't even need to get high. Like, you can actually use this for like, you know what I mean? Like your period, like use this cream. This will be like all these different things, horrible
Totally.
burn marks from working in kitchens. Like, and so I love that you bring that up because I think that, one thing that was really lost during the pandemic was this idea of like neighbors and, it was lost, but then it also became everything, right? Like your
Totally.
communities. And, I think even if doing a breathwork class, which in South America by an old abuela, which really sounds like my dream, actually.
We can make
I'm
that.
down. We could
I
make
got
that
you,
happen.
man.
I'm like very into that, actually. If that's not an opportunity for you, like, if one of your kids' friends at school like lives with their grandmother, like go over there and chat with them. Adults
Yes.
love me, so I never had that problem. I was like that annoying little kid that was like, "Hi, Mrs. Schaefer. Can I talk to Emily? Yeah, how are you? How was your day
I
at the
love that.
office?" Like I
I
was
see it.
I was like such an annoying little kid. But truly, I think it's like so important and like, understanding like plants and like
Yes.
plants that you can grow yourself. And I really love that though. But because I do, it does, I'm aware enough. And I think because of how I view the world, what I've seen, who I've been around, it really, my stomach can and has and will turn sometimes when I do see the kind of like co-opting, watering down of
Yes.
spirituality, whether it is through yoga or, which I know, is pretty mainstream obviously now, or like putting yoni eggs or whatever the fuck else is going on around the town. So I
Mhm.
think it is important to kind of not necessarily shy away from the whole kind of world of
Yes.
spirituality and healing arts, so to speak, because you're scared you're going to like offend or you won't do it right. But I think you're right. Like learning from people around you
Totally.
is
And
is
something that one
important.
of my students said to me, she's an Indigenous woman, and she reminded our class one day. She said, "Please don't forget that Indigenous people are still all over the United States. There, we don't have to go to Central or South America to learn from Indigenous elders. They are living among us in every state in this country." So one of the things that I would just recommend is like, if that's something that's interesting to you, especially if you want to give back to the Indigenous people whose land we are now completely have colonized, right? Look up the Indigenous communities in your state, in your town, in your county. You'll be surprised how
Yeah.
many open and public ceremonies they have, sweat lodges and sun dances. And that is all over the US. And they actually are inviting people to join some of these things. So I want to just point that out. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, I was actually just thinking about the term whiteness. I don't know if you like are familiar with the term whiteness. It doesn't actually mean to be a white person. It's like this like colonizer spirit, right?
Oh,
Which by the
no, I
way,
don't think about, I don't like that. I don't want, I mean, I think about it, but I'm like,
yes.
ooh, okay. Yeah.
Well,
So
I was thinking
continue.
about what that actually means the other day because it's not just for white people, right? The colonizer spirit, the colonizer mindset is you could be a person of color and still perpetuate that kind of harm. So I was thinking about what does that actually mean in the wellness industry? And this literally just hit me over the week that I was in Maui. What I think is happening a lot that feels so sickening is that you've got people who still have a lot of personal work to do, still a lot of their own ancestral reclamation and ancestral reckoning that they have not done. And yet they're offering something as though they have. So you have things that are well packaged and you have the language of, a meditation class or a yoga class or a breathwork session, but this person themselves has not taken the time, the effort, or had the practice of actually going inside of themselves and really doing that work so that it's authentic to and for them first. And what happens in this capitalistic wellness industry is that you can go and sign up for a breathwork class or a yoga teacher training, and you can get certified in 2 weeks or a month or a class. And what I try to show people who take trainings with me is like, yes, you come for an intensive 4 to 6 days and it's intense. It is real deep work, but that doesn't mean that you get a certificate. What it's about is practicing this on yourself. And after you get 200 hours of practicing this on yourself with your friends and family, then I will give you a certificate that just says that you've completed 200 hours of practice. But what really is required of a practitioner to not be someone that's co-opting or inappropriately sharing the work that others have paved the way for is that we are allowing ourselves to be changed and transformed and reclaiming our own heritage and our own ancestral patterns and cycles, which are often not pretty. And I think that's the problem that we're seeing here in the wellness industry.
Yes. I mean, yes. Also in the and I was just talking about this with somebody the other day, but I also find it with the advice industry. I find it in the weight loss, which has now been called wellness, which is very tricky right now, industry.
Yes.
I find it really, because, our bodies, as you said, it's something that it's hard to self-regulate. We've been taught not to cry. We've been taught to kind of brush it off and keep it moving. We've been taught that rail thin, white, blonde, blue eye, is beautiful. For a sliver of a moment, J-Lo really had us with the butt, which I really needed for my own self. Even
Appreciate
those
her.
Kardashians, which I have a very troubled relationship with.
Same.
And now that seems to have just gone right back by the wayside once again. And we're favoring this idea of intermittent fasting, but not done under the supervision of somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing, which then actually really leads to major calorie deficit and starvation. We're going into this Ozempic craze, which I'm fucking sick of talking about because it's so triggering for me. But we are, and we have to admit it. I was in the fucking Ralph's and the chick at the checkout counter was talking about being on Ozempic. And I was like, girl, the checkout counter, the woman at Ralph's, this is this is where it's gone to. Mindy Kaling and Adele, I can take. This, I can't take. Do you know what I mean? What? At the Ralph's? Get out of here. But I think, that we have such a complicated relationship with our bodies, particularly women. So the idea of being taught how to self-regulate and use, your mind and your heart to give something back to yourself by somebody that's not proficient or have done the work themselves is a really scary place. And we also see in this I know how to bag a guy in 10 days, like all this weird shit. TikTok has freaked me out. I went on it, I go on it, I come out. I feel like I've just been like, on a water slide at like Raging Waters in 1993, where I'm like, I feel like everyone's peed on this. I don't know what it's, but I have to go on it because if I don't go on it, everyone's going to talk shit about me. And then I go on it and I'm like, I don't want to do that again. It was kind of fun and it was real quick. And I like my life flashed before my eyes, but here I am. Great analogy, actually. Raging water slides. Yes. And TikTok.
I love that.
But it is scary and it's gotten to, I think it's good to bring up the idea that, making sure that whoever you're working with, especially with the breath work, because you are right, that rhythmic breathing does like kind of knock some things out of you sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in terms of resources, it's like there are so many resources out there, actually, if you look these up. So now what I'm saying when I get asked this question is to really be mindful about who you work with and who you look to for this kind of healing. If you're listening, you're like, I struggle with anxiety. These practices, breath work, psychedelics in safe spaces and with professionals, like you can really have a lifestyle difference. You can actually be a person who says, I used to be anxious, right? That can change for you. But if we're not doing it with professionals who are trauma informed, it's actually going to make it worse. It's going to re-traumatize.
Yeah, I don't want to go do fucking ketamine or mushrooms with some rando. I've been hearing that all over LA. I'm like, yo, I don't know about that. In fact, the listeners do know, I got sent like a huge box of mushrooms, which is so crazy. They're right over there. But and they're all like microdosed out. And I'm totally, listen, I've done a ton of mushrooms in my life. Every time is different. The last time I did them, it didn't work. The time before it, I didn't take enough or they were old or something. The time before that, I had such an amazing experience. I was with my really old girlfriends. We like saw this incredible lightning, like almost it was like fireworks. But I came out of it. It was raining. I woke up the next morning. I was like, yeah, fuck my job. I hate this job. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to like chill out. I love at the time, I was like, I love my girlfriend. I love my friends. I fucking hate my job. And like, I got to make some changes. And I did. Yeah. And it was great. But for me, being that I'm on now, I've been on an anti-anxiety and anti-depression medication. I'm not touching those mushrooms until somebody tells me what the fuck I'm supposed to do with them. So they're there right next to my lovely vintage Yogi jacket from 1992. Very safe right there. And I'm not touching them. And I think that's the point, right? Is like, you got to be smart about these new methods of I don't know, of help that are, I think people like just microdosing mushrooms on their own is buck wild. So like, don't go do ecstasy or ketamine or mushrooms with some like rando in your town that's like, I'm going to do a guide, because that happens.
Exactly. No, I mean, it's happening right now as we speak and with millions of people probably. So
I was like, are you high on mushrooms? And am I the person guiding you? Oh my God. Could you imagine?
Yeah. It's like, so the resources are out there. You can look things up and you can find somatic therapy, breath work, psychedelic therapy, all of this. And a lot of it's now decriminalized all over the States. So it's actually about like, do your homework and really set intentions about what you want. And remember that nothing is a quick fix. Healing is a journey. It's a lifestyle. This is not like a means to an end. But if you are feeling like you're in cycles that you just can't get out of and you need help, like there are professionals out there and you just got to do the homework and really feel into, okay, is this the right professional for me? Because I think what's happening a lot is people are looking at what's trendy and who's cool, and it may not actually be the right person for them, even if it's right for someone else. So obviously I'm totally opening my DMs to anybody who is interested in doing breath work with me. I do it every month online. I do some in person, but I may not be the person for you. So I can recommend you some other people, but you can also just go and look up breath work in your town and you will find a long list of people that you can work with. And then you want to just sit through each person, read their website, feel into, is this someone that can help me? Does this feel right for me? because this stuff is potent. When you get into healing, you're talking about deep psychological shifts, right? And when we have these deep subconscious unravelings, it can really change our entire life. And I had to learn early in my career as a healer that I had to start warning people like, hey, just so you know, if you come to me for a session, your life might change. That's a real thing. And just like you said, you took microdoses and you had to quit your job because you knew that was not it. This is the kind of stuff that happens when we have these deep psychological shifts in our subconscious minds. And so I just want to like let people know that sometimes I think people are actually afraid to go and do the work to find the right people because they know that things need to change. Some of y'all know you need to leave that husband or wife. Some of y'all know you need to leave that job. Some of y'all know you need to move out of that city because you've been called to go somewhere else. And when you do this work in a real way, you can't unknow it. And so you want to do the work to find the right people to help you.
The funny thing about life and timing is that I was verified on Instagram the morning after we recorded this. And it was a few days before everyone in the world could just buy their verification. Similarly to how I felt when I finally got 10,000 followers and a swipe up. And then I think it was less than 24 hours and Meta just let everybody get a swipe up. It's like, I'm finally kind of seen and heard, but then all of the validity and weight and pressure like disappears. Like it doesn't even matter anymore. This like whole waiting to be recognized, getting recognized, and then losing all of the reason why it mattered in the first place seems to be a cyclical story in my life. Millana stayed with me after the interview, and we chatted a little bit about how Instagram mimics the same feelings I had as a young girl when I would be indoctrined into like a cool girl group and then, you know, at some point cycled out. It feels like shit. And if you're an ongoing listener, then you know that these events in my childhood impacted me. You are no stranger to hearing me talk about the bullies that I dealt with while growing up and the childhood friend dynamics that have really shaped and impacted me as a person, right? I have a lot of shit to get through, a lot of childhood trauma. And it was interesting because when Millana and I were talking, she suggested that I go and see a practitioner that she really likes to kind of work out like the bullying girl group friend meta dynamic. And I couldn't help but think in my mind, not only while she was talking, but after, like, oh my God, if I were to think about all the shit that I really need to work on from childhood trauma, the bullying is like 5th on the list, which leads me to the conclusion that I definitely need to seek probably more intense therapy. I love talk therapy. I can't, stand behind it enough. But I'm like, look, maybe it's more. Maybe I need to do more. And maybe I need to like learn other methods. And that's why I was so excited to bring her on the show today, because even breath work or reminding yourself to get outside, like I've been gardening. The gardening I'm terrible at, but getting outside and not looking at my computer or my email or Instagram or Patreon or TikTok or whatever it is, has that sunshine, that vitamin D, which by the way, I did go to the doctor and apparently I'm vitamin D deficient, which like shit. It really does help. Anyway, please follow Millana. And if you'd like to see her stunning face talk to me while I look like a troll under the bridge with no makeup on, head over to my Patreon and subscribe, and you can watch the full video there. Anyway, be kind to yourself. Take a breath. Yeah. And thanks for listening.